Hey everyone, welcome to the AMA session roundup for MechWarrior 5. This is number 6, I believe. This is one specifically talking about procedural levels. And one thing I'll get out of the way before the questions come up. Procedural levels for them isn't the same way as what you might think with a lot of independent titles you play, where the tile sets are randomly generated via an integer value. This one, they have actually created numerous tiles with many different layers. And when they talk about procedural levels, what they mean is it will take the information based on the planet you're on, the contract type you're taking, that kind of thing, and then it will draw from all of those map layers and templates that they've created with the numerous different values within those layers, and then it stitches the level together based on that. So you won't have it where it's randomly generating forests and stuff, because the forests are already hand-placed on those tiles. All those buildings are already hand-placed on those. There are just many different variations of the tile, and that's how it works. So just to clear that up for anyone who has any sort of lingering questions with regards to how the randomness of the levels are actually created. So jumping straight in with the first question, how will the procedural level generator place objectives and spawn points? For instance, is there anything that will prevent the objective being right in front of you when you step out the dropship? There is. They said that it isn't random, as I just explained. When the level generator starts, it will place the objectives using the scenario generator, and the game will then make sure that you don't drop too far away from an objective, but also not so close that you are right on top of it, and also means you don't get shot the second you arrive. The differences can differ, though, based on the type of mission that you're currently performing. There was a question about the weekly screenshots. Can they see ones that aren't just all grassy fields? They're going to work on that and get more screenshots. In fact, what you're seeing on this video are all of the weekly screenshots with some new ones as they've been adding them, showing off different mechs, different effects and stuff. Were you able to code level generation in a way that some missions would have physical different paths that you could take that will allow you to bypass enemy forces, and missions where you don't need to kill anything at all? They said that some of the mission setups will allow you to bypass enemies. Whether you can avoid them or not kill any enemies is going to be down to numerous factors, such as the sensors, the weather systems, that kind of thing. I get the impression that, to be honest, probably every single mission you're going to be shooting something, though. Killing somebody. You're not just going to be, sneaking around, destroy the objective or whatever it is, and then running away. I don't think that's going to happen. Is there a biome that will be more common than others? What is the rarest type of biome in the game? The most common one is Earth-like biomes, basically, which cover a huge array of, obviously, Earth-type locations, deserts, forests, plains, that kind of thing. They didn't answer the rarest type one, though, so that one is open. Will players ever have control over discrete individual layers of a map's procedural generation construction? Apparently, their first version of the system will allow high-level. What is this? Yeah, it will allow players at high-level access to the procedural generation system for your own personal requirements when you're making a level. Although all of this has to be put into context, is that this won't be out of the box, as far as I know. This will be on the same level as modding, so it'll be post-release when you get your hands on these. But apparently, the level generation will still be on the same lines as anything you can do in Unreal 4 editor currently for maps, and you'll have access to all of the things that they currently use to make their levels. Let's see, what's the next one? How many tile sets or environment types? This was my question. Will the game have at launch? This one actually caught them. They weren't sure. Apparently, as far as I remember, someone actually started going through the folders within the game files to see how many. They were saying 8, but the number could be a lot higher. Then they stressed that although that seems like a low number, you then take into account that that's 8 multiplied the number of many variations based on the mission type and the requirements and all these kind of things. So it could be huge, potentially, and even bigger with further additions by them officially and obviously modding, that kind of thing. Would it be possible to extend the map tiles infinitely in a combination with level streaming and world origin repositioning to achieve an endless level? No. You will not be able to have an infinite level where you can just run along. And as far as I remember, later on they did mention that there is no level streaming. Because, as I said at the beginning, everything is built using the pre-designed tiles. How does contract generation work with your procedural level generation? Apparently this is based on many different parameters. Your reputation, where you currently are, what year it is, the factions you're encountering, who you're working for, Many different things like that will tie into it, and that's what it will draw the tiles and thus the enemy types you encounter and that kind of thing from the system before it generates it. How will procedural levels impact salvage from missions? Story missions always have a set amount of salvage. Procedural missions will have numerous factors, again, that determine the amount and type of salvage you get. If you're doing a mission where they refer to it as if your side controls the field, as in I guess you wipe out all the enemies, thus you dominate the battlefield, you have a higher chance of getting more salvage post-mission. However, if you're doing a mission that's more of a raid or a harassment type or a distraction mission, that kind of thing, where the enemy will still be in force on the field at the end, you're likely to get far less salvage, or possibly none at all, depending on the different factors. I quite like that idea. So with developing procedural levels, was it challenging to determine what assets they needed, or with a lore being as lore detailed as BattleText, was there a lot that you wanted to add or include that couldn't be done because of the constraints that rationally must be placed in developing a game? And most importantly, will we see a triple F burger franchise and then lay waste to it during the course of the story, forming a corporate adversary that we must constantly get? Basically, he's asking, are you gonna have a scenario where you do a mission and you piss off a corporation and they start sending like a rival group after you? The answer to that is no. I think they mentioned in the previous one that you're not going to be generating rivals in the sense of the Middle-earth games recently, where you could have certain generals that kept coming back and they would develop, like, scars or wearing a hood or different gear and stuff as a rival for you. That's not going to happen. So as I said, simple answer is no. I think even Russ jumped in on that one. He said he wasn't going to be answering the questions. So will the mission generator take constants of planets into effect when it's choosing the biome for the planet? Apparently yes, it will. Depending on where the mission is, will determine the biome that you land on. Will Instant Action Scenario Editor allow you to mess with the tile sets and map generation? It's not a system they haven't yet, but they hope they can get it in before launch. How will you ensure that elements do not look unnaturally out of place and will not be repetitive? They're fairly certain that the layouts will not become repetitive due to the many different variations that they have. They said that it will launch with numerous layouts for different items, bases, cities, industrial centres, outposts, different types of open terrain, plains, hills, mountains, all that kind of thing, lakes, rivers. And so as you play, it shouldn't ever really be repetitive. You shouldn't really see certain elements again and again and again through missions, is what they're fairly confident in. Next one was, will we see large bodies of water like lakes, ponds, or wide, sinuous rivers? Apparently lakes and ponds, yes. Wide rivers or large rivers, no. That is a system they did want to add, but they weren't happy with how it looked in game, so they had to drop it. They do have sinuous oceans, though. Does the mission system allow for wrinkles that might throw unexpected curveballs at you during a mission, like alternative or changing objectives and additional enemies? Yes, and the system is completely capable of doing it. Again, for mission editors, people who want to create their own scenarios, you will be able to add those elements in as well. Concerning modding, will there be a map editor where we can make our own levels? And as for level designs, will there be urban cities? So far as in the pictures we've seen, we're just seeing a lot of open grassy terrain, and or just open up a bit more. Apparently, the procedural system can make everything from scratch for you, or it can be set using pre-made templates within the editor, and you can mix them as well, mixing these systems for more customization. So, yeah, there will be the ability to add your own templates in as well, creating even more level types, basically. Will there be elements of unpredictability for missions? For example, having unexpected reinforcements brought in by the enemy from hiring a rival mercenary unit, or their own forces being used against you in a mission that was stated to have little to no resistance? Yes, this can happen. Again, with the previous question, you can have it that dynamically changing objectives can occur. How will different biomes affect performance of mechs? Basically, this has been asked before a few times, and the answer's always been the same. Sensors will be affected by different weather types, but as far as things like speed, maneuverability, speed is only going to be affected by hills slowing you down and bumping into shit like trees and buildings, but that's about it. Will we see animals and humans running around? No animals, and possibly no humans. Again, the human thing has been talked about before by Russ in a previous AMA, where he said they hope to do that with people sort of running for cover in the city areas and stuff, but definitely no animals. So you won't be able to, like, roast a pig or something like it's fucking District 9. Will there be settings that allow you to set level design preferences? Probably not. You can set the terrain, the slope, and arrangement basic templates, but nothing other than this. Will there be larger amounts of content and randomness for less predictable gameplay through repeated playthroughs? Their intent is that when you play, it is different every time. Even playing the same mission types will have different outcomes, basically different layouts and stuff like that, as mentioned before. Are the generated maps always squares, or will we have something varied and more complex, like base geometric shapes for the mission area? This one I have to admit I have a little bit of ignorance about, obviously not really messing with any kind of level editor myself, but they did say maps will mostly be vaguely rectangular in shape. They will have others that could be more of an L shape, but they're not going for anything that will include spiral shapes or anything like that. If that makes sense to you as a level editor, I hope that's cleared some things up for you. Currently, Battletech uses a procedural mission generator for their game. However, it's extremely limited to the point of being able to predict, based on the mission type, when and exactly where enemies will come from, and roughly the size of the enemy force, and what types of mechs. Will MW5 suffer from this same issue, or will the generation method be more robust? Their answer was they're pretty confident that predictability will be pretty low. You won't be able to guess where enemies will come from or how many, if at all. And they're fairly confident that because of the way that the tile systems will work and how it places the different elements when it's generating the mission, you won't see the same type of layout, so you won't be able to guess anyway where enemies will be and where they might come from with reinforcements, that kind of thing. Will there be buildings that you can walk around in, like the big mech factory in MechWarrior 4? This is a no. There were a few questions about this. There will be no large buildings or superstructures that you'll be able to walk around inside and have fights in. Since the maps are a finite size, will the boundaries be natural, such as impassable mountains or oceans or anything like that? They said yes, they will have mountain ranges that will stop you past a certain distance, oceans, artificial barriers like very large walls inside bases, that kind of thing. They did say that they wouldn't have invisible walls, but then later on they do mention that there are in fact invisible walls at the very edge of the level, so yeah, on that one. They're also aiming that they don't really want any levels that will just be very wide flat plains, if they can avoid it, so they always want to have something interesting for you to see. And even if you do escape the confines of the level, there won't be anything out there for you to find. Will mechs have effects like being wet in rainy areas and covered in snow and snowy ones? Yes, apparently they will. Apparently when it's raining, you'll see the rain effect impacting on the glass. I think we've seen a video last year that already showed that off. I assume snow will be doing the same thing, landing on glass and melting and stuff. So yeah, that's going to be there. Will the maps be moddable, as in can we add terrain managers, etc.? So you can add your own templates, your own mission types, with your own objectives. Basically, whatever you can do in UE Editor, you can do for MechWarrior 5. As for structures on these maps, are they going to be modular and built similar to the maps, or are the buildings and structures part of the tiles as well? The answer to this one was tiles can be used. The tiles used can be set for numerous requirements for, say, making a tile a military base or a urban centre. They can then generate the buildings as required based on the configuration by the level designer. Tiles can be themed, such as industrial, military, urban, or more, and then they can be further tweaked to set them to be as densely occupied as you need, or very sparsely occupied. So it can be like a small outpost with numerous smaller buildings or settlements, farming areas, that kind of thing, with small clusters of buildings. Or they could be a very large, dense urban sprawl or a military sprawl, that kind of thing, and then you can drop in. You can choose within these tile sets where enemies will be, that kind of thing, and how they will, where they will spawn in, where they might come in from, that kind of thing. Will we see heavy urban environments in addition to regular, more open fields that we're used to seeing? Apparently you won't see like mega cities. Tile sizes are 750 by 750 meters, and a city can occupy an entire 750 by 750 tile. You can then at least put multiple tiles like that together. So I guess you can make a pretty large urban centre, but I don't think you can make like a map where you can see just city from one end to the other and nothing else. I don't think that's possible, is what they were aiming at. Question was, we're going to have a mall-style venue in MechWarrior 5. Again, this is like the superstructures thing. They basically said, oh, modders will be able to do that, but they're not going to do it. Will bodies of water that you mentioned earlier contain any naval forces similar to MechWarrior 4, or are they just terrain features? And they are just that. They are terrain features. You won't see any boots going about firing weapons at you. All the terrain info provided currently appears very Earth-like. How alien will the terrain get? This was one of the. I think, to be honest, I get the impression that the team just really want you to be running around on Earth-type biomes. They're not really aiming to do anything truly alien or very, very unusual looking, at least. So the phrase "there's nothing stopping them from doing it" was used. So I would guess that they don't have anything alien, but they could do it if they really wanted to. So will the level generation affect the enemy mechs, such as a focus on weapons with less heat generation on hot maps, as an example? The AI will run its own heat management, so yeah, if it's on a volcanic map, it will try to fire its less heat-intensive weapons more often, and maybe save its big ones when it's not got much heat. So hopefully the AI won't be so dumb it'll just overheat itself constantly, or it cheats and never overheats, that kind of thing. Hopefully it won't. Next one. To what extent will weather affect sensors? Percentage based on terrain, etc. Will there be magnetic anomalies? Basically, will the environment affect you to a noticeable extent when in reference to sensors and locking? Also, thank you for the tile size clarification. Apparently, sensors will be affected by the weather effects. This was covered in one of the previous ones. At AMA, they were mentioning that things like storms, very bad weather, that kind of thing, anything that reduces your visibility, line of sight, will probably affect your sensors in some way, and this goes for the enemy as well. So if you have reduced detection range, so do they, so you can effectively use it to kind of skirt around forces if you need to. What type of weather effects will there be and how will they affect? Example, rain, fog, sandstorms, electromagnetic. Now apparently all of those bar electromagnetic are in the game, and they would like to do electromagnetic storms. Maybe by release we'll see them. Can we add trigger effects to objectives? So if I want a building to explode once you reach a certain objective area as part of a mission plot point, can you do that? Apparently you can. You can add trigger effects when you reach a location, though sadly the building exploding is not one they've added. So maybe that's a mod thing someone would have to do. Following the biomes affecting performance, will there be swamps and similar terrain that can slow you down, or an ice field where it takes longer to slow down or speed up? Not really. Basically, they just went back to the if you bump into shit, it'll slow you down. If you try and walk up a hill, it'll slow you down. But being in really, really deep mud or water or in a swamp won't slow you down that much, if at all. Going back to MechWarrior 3, there are a couple of missions that involve battling out into some rather interesting underground conflict. Basically, will we have underground bases? No. Unfortunately. No underground, no underwater bases. But there is nothing in the system that prevents it, it's just something they haven't done. Will they have a survival or horde mode in the game similar to Mech Assault 2? They can't say exactly compared to Mech Assault 2, but there are mission types that will require you to distract the enemy for as long as possible. So you will be taking on like waves of enemies that come after you as you're acting as a distraction force for another friendly element to raid a base, that kind of thing. Is the level generator at the level of not fracking up the map to the extent where it will block progress with an unlucky mountain range position, that kind of thing? Does it happen sometimes, or is it perfectly solved and a non-issue? Apparently settings for level did used to throw up this kind of issue. They did have it in earlier versions of the game, but it's not as bad now, though they do recommend you probably should try and set mix with jump jets in case this happens. I think it's a bit kind of bullshit, really. Because there are just some mech variants out there that don't have jump jets. How are you supposed to know which ones you should take and shouldn't take? Anyway, will the interactions and impacts from our missions when they're complete, like damage to structures and allies and stuff, impact the generation of the environment in particular missions to follow on? I think he's talking about the mini arc missions where you'd be on the same world doing multiple drops. Apparently, not specifically, no. They will have mission arcs that affect the choice of other missions, but the environment won't be remembered, so to speak. So if you do tear down that small farmstead and burn everything down to the ground and blow up all the buildings, it'll be there if it generates it again. Will there be environments where your sensors fail completely? No. Interesting, with jump jets landing on top of a building, will that affect the structure and can you fall through it? This has been mentioned before. Heavier mechs jumping on smaller buildings will indeed jump and go all the way through, destroying the building. They did refer to larger buildings having a steel core, or basically an iron core, so they're ones that can support up to the heaviest mechs, like a Highlander, for instance, jumping on top of them, and it won't collapse. How fast will the generation run, and how heavily will it affect load times? This one, basically, it generates the levels in milliseconds. Really, the load times are based on your own hardware. So if you've got a really good rig, it will load up the mission a lot quicker. If you've got a gas-powered Seabiscuit, it will take forever. What was the next one? Will there be a possibility of a map with two extreme opposite biomes meshed together, like glacial world with volcanic rifts? At the moment, no, sadly. Will there be any hostile terrain, like lava that damages you, or rough terrain that can knock you over? No, not at the moment. Will there be shut-down mechs and tanks that you can salvage or loot if you don't destroy them, but run in danger that they might attack you later in the mission if you choose to leave them untouched? So basically, the idea, will you be able to loot certain mechs, and if you don't destroy them, will they come back and sort of ambush you, that kind of thing? They don't have anything like that. You won't see anything where you have tanks playing possum, or mechs that are like hiding or pretending to be deactivated, that kind of thing. The AI just isn't capable of doing that. Will we be able to play on Solaris 7? There is no Solaris City. I think you can take missions on Solaris. I think they mentioned that in the past, but I don't think you can actually do any of the arena type stuff. Can you return to a procedurally generated mission? For example, once the level is generated, will it persist for your playthrough? Apparently it won't. You'd have to get extremely lucky for it to bring up the same random set of values to bring that same level back to you again. Will random weather damage your mech like lightning strikes? No. Are you guys playing around with gravity for moon-based missions, low-G and high-G environments? They've been playing around, but there's no environment like that just yet. Will you be including different gravity for worlds affecting things like jump distance? I'd really love a low grav battle on a small planetoid. Apparently they have used the lore where possible for designing certain worlds and thus the level layouts, that kind of thing, what kind of environments, but they haven't hooked anything up like that yet as far as gravity is concerned. Can you hide from the AI in building husks, and will it affect weapon damage for the AI? It's possible, although apparently they did say that you'll usually have multiple enemies running around, so it'd be hard to completely avoid detection inside a building husk. But if you were to run in one and a mech shot at you, the building would block the damage, so you can use that for cover, similar to the David ambush short story that I read. Would the destroyable buildings act differently based on your mech's tonnage? Like a light mech might be able to play through or even land and run along the structure, but heavier mechs, they won't be able to. Apparently light mechs are more impacted speed. They thought they were talking about if you tried to run through a building, they were talking about running on the tops. Basically, you won't be able to run on the tops of buildings. I think the idea is that the rooftops are all too small. They're not going to be like these big interconnected things. It's not Assassin's Creed, people. We're not doing that. How will the deployment in a mission work? Is it chosen randomly, or able to select a landing zone from a fitting landscape on the map? The mission generator will detect the deployment zone for you. It goes back to that whole the tile thing when it generates it. I think what they're saying is that there are a number of tiles that are already designed as drop zone tiles, and that's where it'll draw one of those from the pool. It'll attach it to the level where it makes sense for the environment, and then that's where you go. Any underwater or in-space missions at launch? No. Thanks for answering the questions. Well, my last question is, what has been the hardest thing for the teams to work on and overcome? Apparently, it was making these systems properly place items without them being too, well, random looking, basically. How many factions can you encounter? Can you encounter multiple factions? This question, I think they got a bit lost on, because I think they thought they were asking about, like, can you encounter Marek and Lao and Magistracy of Canopus on one map? And then I think the question was, can you encounter, like, pirates, friendlies, like House Marek mechs, and sort of, like, those kind of faction things. I think the question out of all of the 3 or 4 people talking about at the time just boiled down to, there's generally just you, any friendlies that are with you, and then the enemies. So I don't think you can have like 3 factions fighting each other on the map. Can weather or daylight conditions change during a mission? Yes, they can. Although I think they were answering weather, because day and night cycle things I think was a little bit cloudy on that wasn't a pun. It was just to talk about whether it really did change from day to night, that kind of thing. I'm not sure. Will there be any specific landmarks that are generated specific to roles? For example, can the code materialize a natural sniper roost or create an interesting bottleneck to take advantage of tactically? They said that it wasn't essentially a level item when they were designing the levels. These might appear, though, based on the tiles that have been selected. So I think you can have like outcroppings and stuff you might be able to use as a sniper rooster. You might find a certain area that could be a bottleneck, but it's not like they've been specifically developed for those functions. Will rain and sandstorms wear your paint, and will lightning have a chance to strike you? Going back to the previous question, no, basically to those. Can you lower the forest density with graphic settings, or only the object foliage density per object? No, for the forest. If you reduce your graphic settings, the forest will still be as dense as it was. It just won't look as pretty. What's your favourite feature idea you had to abandon during the map and procedural development process, so that someone can mod it for them? The ability to connect tile features to make things seem more natural, apparently. How diverse or robust is the skybox? This skybox question came up a few times. They skipped, I think, 3 questions regarding skyboxes, and when it got to this one, I think they were just like, I think they just said, I've seen some really nice skyboxes was one of the answers. So I like to think it might be to do with Sky TV, and they're just like, maybe they're just asking what their favourite Sky TV like digital box was like across the years. But yeah, I don't really think they gave a shit. Will day and night cycles have noticeable difference in temperatures? No, there's no difference in temperature. Does time of day change at the same rate throughout the map, or with a particularly long or big map can you see the actual Terminator line? In the speed of day, night transition influenced by the implied planet diameter and distance to its suns and moons. It's a very technical question, this one. You're talking about PGI here, folks. They're not going that far. It's not a huge team. It says no, weather does change, but basically the short answer is no. Will we have night vision and heat vision? Yes. They didn't give any specifics on what type, so we're going to go with the answer of it being like MechWarriors at the moment. With a tile size of 750 meters, I'm imagining a dense urban environment that small would look abrupt and possibly out of place. Do you have any transitional tiles to merge nature into civilization? It's a challenge they're working on to make it look less obvious. They are, working on it though, so hopefully by release it should be done. Will there be power lines across the map? No. How many enemy mechs, tanks, aircraft can be on the map at a time? Apparently they don't really have an upper limit of aircraft, so you could have potentially hundreds of VTOLs and helicopters and whatever flying around. But on the ground it's a very different story because of the terrain features, and the fact so you couldn't have hundreds of tanks because inevitably some of them would just get stuck trying to path around each other and gear like that. So as aircraft, as many as you like, but they said they haven't really tested the upper limit of the ground vehicles just yet, but they know it's not as many as aircraft. Are there any collateral damage taxes for missions regarding building destruction? This has been asked before. If the mission requires you to protect certain buildings or to minimize damage to, say, an urban center, you will lose that bonus if it was on the table in the contract. What happens when you go out of bounds? Apparently, this is going back to the visible wall thing that they said there weren't anything, but then there are. They said you get a warning and then you will hit a wall. So I think there are invisible walls. If you can escape the level, there are invisible walls. Were there any concepts for terrain, climates, or structures that you would have liked to have added but couldn't due to time and technical limitations? Apparently, large rivers being one. Road networks couldn't be added either, so expect some areas to look a bit odd, I guess, on the outside. Bridges was another one that couldn't be added due to time and technical issues. Also, underwater bases were off the table for pretty much the same reasons. Will enemies be procedurally generated, like Kurita mechs being more common in Kuritan space? No helicopters in vacuums, that kind of thing. Yes, apparently the game does have a list, basically a mech table, similar to what you'd find in the books, that describe what variants, who uses what mech, that kind of thing. And obviously, you're not going to get VTOLs and you're not going to get helicopters flying around in airless moons. Will urban environments have multiple levels of elevation? I'm picturing bridges, tunnels, civic engineering tiers on slopes. Would certain terrain features be procedurally generated, or would they be custom assets? Apparently there are no missions with this multiple level of elevation yet. Will there be environment features, like in MechWarrior Online's Forest Colony, trees of iron, or terrain that will be indestructible? Apparently they have no indestructible trees. It's just if it's a very big tree, you will knock it over, but it'll slow you down. as an example. Are you guys still around 20 biomes? They honestly don't know where they're at with the number of biomes. I think that goes back to my question earlier. That they honestly don't know. Are there designated exfiltration zones, or is it possible to abandon a contract if you're hitting too much resistance? They did mention, they laid out that if you were in a mission early on and you quit, as in abandoning the objective, you will be obviously receive the usual punishment, loss of rep. Obviously, your faction relations will drop, that kind of thing. You'll be penalised C-bill wise, that kind of thing. But if you're late into a mission, you're pretty beat up, you've achieved a few of the objectives, and then you have to pull out, you won't be hit anywhere near as badly for dropping out because of, well, you didn't want to die, kind of thing. When it comes to procedural design, what challenges have you faced matching that with the AI controlling various units or the players and what they face? I mean, things like pathing and determining if they will try to plow through a forest or a building to get to you, that kind of thing. This was an interesting one. Apparently, since everything that's placed on the level has all that information pre-done, it does tell the AI that they can go through certain zones and others they can't. So with the case of buildings, apparently there are buildings that are just, yes, they can plow right through them. Others that are counted as important structures to that faction, so no, they will try to avoid them or go around them entirely. And there are some that they will have as if they cannot reach it any other way, they will go through the building type thing. So all of those are pre-done when the tile is selected, and the enemies will already know where they can and can't sort of run through. Will destruction remain, or will it fade away, like when you shoot the snow on Polar Highlands? They wanted to allow you to see the carnage for the most part, so buildings will leave a kind of rubble area that will affect speed when you try and run through them. But other smaller items, like bits of mechs that have been blown off, will eventually vanish, just for technical reasons. During combat, will terrain become battle-scarred where your mech may need to maneuver around craters? No, nothing really like that. How large can a level be? Apparently the level limit is due to floating point numbers. This is one of those technical ones for you map makers out there. But apparently it's plus or minus 8 kilometers squared. This is the upper limit before apparently it starts doing weird things. They have themselves gone with 4 to 5 kilometers as their upper limit, with no dynamic loading either. When it comes to procedural generation, will there be ability to make your own drop zones for you, your enemy, and or other AI? They said if you're making your own level, every tile set is set for a drop zone. So you can do things like hot drops, enemy spawns, and they can be configured for whatever purpose you need, really. The environments maps produced, will they always be fixed in size, or will they scale up or down depending on the number of objects in them? This goes back to the idea that people think it's like the levels are just being designed there and then, and it's just placing all of the objects. Obviously, that's why I made this clarification at the beginning. The question, as they pointed out, is that they decide where the item is placed. The system doesn't randomly choose the terrain. Will enemies ever be in hiding, such as smashing through a building and attacking you in ambush? They're kind of surprised that people want this, but for them it's very low on their list of priorities. They can do it though, since apparently it is in a few story missions, so some spoilers there. When the dropship descends to the LZ, will we be able to see outside of it during the descent? And if so, how far does it extend for horizon visuals? You won't. Apparently when the level is loading, you can still walk around your mech bay, but as soon as the level starts, you will be inside the mech, and thus you won't be able to see out any windows or anything like that. And I think the last question, yes, what is the extreme that we can see? Mountains versus canyons, things like that. Apparently at certain heights you will be able to see the extreme limit of the map tiles, but the environment will be for the most part they'll try to keep those sort of hidden, so you won't see that like bit where you get past level and you just see like an infinite flat plane up to the edge of the tile. They will try and use it so it logically creates certain visual barriers, and also having it that you won't be able to get up to the upper extremes of the environment to do this, mostly because objectives and the such will be placed logically to sort of funnel you toward those locations. And so that was that was the AMA for procedural levels. Some interesting stuff there. It was nice not for it to just sort of go over a lot of older ground that we've covered before. Some of this sounds quite interesting. It sounds like it's going to be pretty good for people who are into map designing and all of the different things that they can add in there, creating their own map types. So yeah, it'd be kind of cool to see what the mod community comes up with, especially with the Steam Workshop integration. I assume this will add God knows how many different levels and variation for people who want to go through on their second, third, however many playthroughs. So yeah, it should be quite fun. So thanks everybody for joining us. This was a longer one, just over half an hour. So I hope this helps again with clearing up any of the questions that have been coming up about MechWarrior 5 as we get ever closer to its release. Only a few months away now, so yeah, it'll be interesting to see. So have a good one all, thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.